We begin the current Daf, Mesechta Bava Metzia Daf and Aleph. We begin 12 lines down at the top of the Amud, where the Gemara is in the middle of a conversation here in the theme of our previous Mishnah regarding the halachas of Oinah and regarding this question regarding what exactly is considered Oinah, as we had discussed regarding when it's a sixth, less than a sixth, and more than a sixth. So the Gemara just illustrates that with a story, finishing up the conversation from our previous Mishnah. So that's throughout the entire world. So we discussed in today's Daf are, as we said, the halacha b'nah, which is when there's a some type of unfair pricing, whether it be for the sellers or the buyer's loss. Question is that masam with lahachzer. Till when can you back out? The Gemara differentiates between if you're buying from a personal individual or from a storekeeper. And the Targers, so the next mission to discuss if someone buys from a merchant, the halacha there might be different, and the Gemara explains why would it be different. If there's a price difference of a sixth, and what happens if someone says that I'm going to sell to you even though it's a sixth? And if that's called mashka because of a teres, that's stipulating against what the teres says, and are you allowed to do that and you get away with that? So we begin the current daf. We're finishing up the halacha of our previous mission that we said ad masem mutal lahachzir. We said how long does the shortchanged party have the right to renege on the agreement? It's ad kadesh tichal l'tagel correct. We had said in the previous mishnah, it's the amount of time it takes to confirm the price with a merchant or a relative. So on that, the Gemara had said, and this is what we just said on the previous one, on the top of the summit, that it's only the buyer. If he was overcharged, he has a little bit of time to reject because he has the purchased item in his possession. They're going to tell him if he made a mistake or not. But the Meichu, we said, the seller, if he's undercharged, you can always retract because he doesn't have it anymore. He already sold it. So how could he find out if he was off or not? Is that the Gemara had said that okay, when he counts the still item, which might take a long time, so only then will he be able to know, and therefore he could be l'olam chayzer. So that's why Gemara now brings 12 lines down another story, and we'll make another differentiation regarding to the halacha of being chayzer, backing out because of the Oinah. Says the Gemara, who gave? There's a certain person that have a nokin varshche lizvune. So he was holding a bundle of silk. It's called a bindles, like a bundles that he was holding in lizvune to sell. Now, Kari Shita, he was calling out, he was asking for the bundle 6 zuzim. So he's saying, he's holding and he's screaming in the marketplace that he wants to sell it for 6 zuzim. Now, the truth is, Vishavi Chamsha, it was only worth 5. Now, keep in mind, if it's worth 5 and he's asking for 6, regarding where this falls into the place of asking for more than how much it's worth. Now, says the Gemara to add to the story, had someone given them 5.5, have a shekel, and this you find this in the shuk all the time. A guy's asking for 6, he said, I'll take 5.5. Now, Aso Gavra V'amar, along came a person and said, look, if I'm going to give him 5.5, have mechila, because that's less than a sixth, and we said this on the previous daf that when you overprice, it's overpriced less than a sixth, so then it's going to be mechila. So he says, look, you know what I'll do? Meaning it's going to be mechila on my part because he overpriced me less than a sixth. You know what? I'll give him 6, and to the contrary, I'll gain them because then I'll take him to court and I'll say, look, he overcharged me more than a sixth. I'll get my money back. So Asa Kamid Rav, give him from the Rav. Amalei says, no, it's not going to work. Within this halacha, only when you're buying from a merchant. When you're buying from a personal individual, there is no halacha b'nah, which Rashi qualifies into Ramaskim Balabayis. He means, let's say, a guy selling his jewelry or some type of household item, which are precious to him, he only sells it for a high price. And it's like he explicitly said, I know that there's a nah, which the Gemara later on Amud Bey is going to tell us that there's no halacha b'nah. That's how Rashi says he found in the Shultas Rebbe Choy that explains this halacha Why, when you buy from a balabais, from a personal individual, you can't make the claim of so you didn't get away by paying 6 instead of 5.5. It's either way not going to have halacha of Aina. Now, the Gemara brings another story that says, but there's a hahu gavra. There was a person that had a naked kefei lizvune. He was holding earrings to sell. Kari shitin, he was calling out 60 zuz for the earrings. V'shavi chamshin, but they were really only worth 50. Now, v'yavi yavali chamshin v'chamsha, if someone would give him 55, he would take that also. So along came a person that says, you know what, I have nearly chamshin v'chamshin, I'm getting 55, hamachila. It's going to be an immediate pardoning, like we said in the previous stuff, that if it's less than the 6, it's immediate a mechila because it's less than the 6. You know, I'll give him 60, I'll take him to court, meaning the amount of time it takes to show a merchant, and I'm going to get my money back because he overcharged me a 6th. So also coming to Rav Chizda, came in front of Rav Chizda. Amalei says to him, no, it's only if you buy from a merchant, but if you're buying from an individual, there's no Eina. So you're paying them a higher price for no reason.
Same story.
Yeah. So Amalei Rav Dimi says, Yishar, you should be strengthened. Yishar, like we say, Yashar Koyach, you should be strengthened. I says, in the coming Mishnah, this next Mishnah I'm about to read says, just like there's Aina for a regular person, so too there's Aina for a merchant. Who's the regular person? Isn't it a personal a homeowner that we say there is Aina? So no, that's specifically B'tzad Riyasa. That's like when you're selling like some hemp garment that's meant to be sold. So because he's an individual, it doesn't take away from the fact that this is a product that was made to sell. But when a guy is selling his own personal items, the akirle, which are precious to him, he doesn't want to sell his armoire, he doesn't want to sell his favorite bike. Let's for a high price. In other words, and this is like, when, as we'll see on the days, when you explicitly say, I don't care, I don't want it to be a no, that's essentially what it always is by a regular homeowner. When he sells his item, the pricing could be way more inflated, and that would not qualify as a fraud of Aina, and therefore you're going to have to pay. You're not going to get the money back from the 60 or from the 6, as we had in these two stories. Now we continue to look at the next Mishnah, which we just mentioned in the previous story, that qualifies the halacha of Aina that we mentioned in the previous Mishnah. Whether a buyer or a seller, yesh l'mayna, the halacha of unfair pricing applies to both of them. Moreover, just like as there's a halacha of Aina for a regular person, the same thing applies to a merchant. However, Rabbi Shloimy disagrees. There's no Eina l'tager, which more later on is going to explain. There is no halacha of Aina for a merchant. Now, moreover, says the Mishnah, Misha Hutlalav, whomever the unfair pricing was placed on him, meaning he was the one that was that suffered from this unfair pricing. Yodel Yona, he has the upper hand. What does that mean? Ratza, if he wants to, he could say, give me my money. Let's say it was the buyer who overpaid. So he could say, hey, I overpaid by $5, give me my $5 back. Or he has a choice to say, tell me ma'ashani sani. He says, give me, meaning either give me all my money back, or give me back at least what was the unfair pricing, like the gouging was for $5 and I paid whatever the $50, whatever. So give me back maybe 25 or whatever it is. So give me back what was the unfair overprice. So he has a choice of either voiding the sale or just getting back that price difference. Says Imam, where do we know this halacha from? That I know applies to the Meicher and the Lekef. Because turn about in the Brisa, the pasuk in Vayikra that talks about this halacha of a nois mammon says, when you sell a sold item to your friend, al tainu, don't be unfair in your pricing. Now, I only know that if the buyer gets ripped off, because we're talking to the seller. If the buyer got conned and he undersold it, how do we know that Allah applies there too? It says in the pasuk, or it says if you're going to buy me out of Misacha, it says al tainu. don't do tainu. So you see that tainu is going back on also aikanai. So it's also when the guy who's buying is being warned not to underpay to the seller. Says the Gemara, and the pasuk had to tell us that halacha applies to the buyer and the seller. Why? Because the Torah only written that the seller is prohibited with Baal Tainu. I'll tell you why. From the Kimle Bezvinte, because the seller knows how much he paid for this item, and when he's selling it, he's doing deliberately about the overcharging of the buyer. So it makes sense that he's a very deliberate party over here. But the buyer, he doesn't know how much it's worth. He didn't pay for this item originally.
So all I know is when the buyer doesn't really know how much it is. So if he knows how much it is, and in both the seller and the buyer know how much it is, and they do the sale, then there's no.
No, I'm saying the contrary. The Gemara is saying we would have thought to say that in general, maybe Oinaz only was said to the seller because he knows how much it's worth. He paid for this. How is he selling it? He paid for it. And now he's charging way more. So Oinaz would be on him. But the buyer doesn't know. He wants to buy a bike.
Does it really know shaykh when you know what it is? A guy says, listen, I have not $10. I know it's costing $15. This is what I have. And the guy wants to sell it to you. You know, it shouldn't be. Is there going to be?
No, so that we'll talk about that. But Mefarish, we're talking about on a base when you're explicit and you say that. Look, we don't want.
That explicit means that they know. So then it shouldn't be. If you know.
It's not just.
Know.
Well, it's not just.
What do you have?
No, would usually be when one party knows and another party doesn't.
Okay, but we both know.
No, if you know, then you're willing. Then you feel exactly. Right, we're talking about stam.
Talking changing his mind, you cannot say, well.
We're talking about stam.
Okay.
When there's nothing specific, you would have thought to say that we wouldn't hold Amalei as Harech. The Torah's not going to start putting the onus of the prohibition on the buyer. It's the seller who knows really what the pricing is. The buyer is just an innocent participant, and therefore you have to say that it applies to the Lekeach too. And because and the Torah had written it only on the buyer, Mishum Dekukani, I would say yes, because he's the buyer. Therefore, he has the higher sense of responsibility. Why? Because the Amri Inchi people say, Zavnis, if you bought an object that lasts, Kanis, you acquired, you gained something because you didn't spend your money it's gone, and it's something that will last for you. So therefore, we're going to hold you more responsible because you're the gaining party. So we're going to hold you that you shouldn't have underpaid for it. Where it's lost. The Amri Inchi, because people say, Zavin, if you sold one of your objects, Ovid, you're losing, because now that you have money, you're going to spend it. I would say, interesting, the Torah is saying, we're not going to make him the liable party, because anyways, he's the losing party. So, therefore, we have to say, both the Meicha and the Lekeach, the halacha of Leisainu applies to. Now, we have in the Mishnah, Yudai says, in another Taka, he disagreed with the Tanakama. Not kashem sheyesh eno beheaded that kach eno l'tagah. No, he says there's no eno by a merchant. Says how does that make sense? Because he's a merchant, so suddenly there's no he's not prohibited in unfair pricing. So Rav Nachman Meravi says, I'll tell you, we're talking about specifically betager safser shanum. We're talking about that this merchant was a broker who he buys and he sells right away. He flips. He buys and flips. So my time, what's the reason why I know wouldn't apply to him? Because made the yad is evinte kamashavia. This guy obviously knows the fair price because he just bought it a few minutes ago. He doesn't wait between buying and selling. And now, if he sold it for a lower price, he obviously must be pardoning his buyer. And so why is he selling it for such a low price? From the Isrami, because it must have been that he needed the money for a new deal. And now he regrets it and is attempting to avoid his transaction by saying, look, I undersold it for so much. He says, no, you knew this. It wasn't a mistake. And therefore, that's why Rabbi Yehuda held that there's no enough for a merchant. That's one pshat. Vashrami says, no, actually a very different pshat. My in latagar enough. What does it mean that there's no enough for a merchant? Is in the betoiris enough? He's not in the halachas of enough. Meaning, to the contrary, that even if it's less than a sixth, if he got ripped off by selling it, he would be able to get his money back, the merchant, the broker, because his livelihood depends on this. So therefore, Chazal Masakin that he could back out even less than a sixth, because this is where he makes his money. So the Matani Gaba said Rav Nachman, we learned in the Brisa like Rav Nachman, like the first pshat, that even if it's the amount of Einah, he cannot back out, and we don't give him back what he unfairly priced it much lower than what its value is. Because the Brisa says like this: Rabbi Yehuda says, "Targo in Einah, the merchant does not have the halacha of Einah neshu baki, because he's a professional. For the fact that it says because he's a baki, must be because he's like a broker. And why is that a reason that there shouldn't be Einah? Like we're saying, because he knows how much it's worth. He did bought it for a few minutes ago, this stock, and he's selling it for much lower because he needs the cash and he wants to go ahead and buy something else. And now he regrets it. He's trying to come up with a claim that he was ripped off by you, the buyer, and therefore he's not going to get his money back. Now the Mishnah had said that Misha Hutel Olav, that in the case of Einah, this discrepancy of a sixth, the wrong party, they have the upper hand, etc. Like we said, the buyer can choose to either void the transaction or demand the difference in price back. So the Gemara says, who's our Mishnah? Similarly, we have a brisa that we quoted in the previous daf of Rav Nassan and Rebuda Nasi, and seemingly our Mishnah is not like either one of them, because the brisa we had quoted in the previous daf, Rav Nassan had said that the transaction is binding, shtus is kana, and the Mav said no, the difference in the price is returned automatically. There's no choosing. Rebuda Nasi had said that no, Yad Meichel Yoyno, the seller has the upper hand, and he can either void the transaction or demand the difference in price. That's what the Bryce had said. So the Gemara is going to point out that our Mishnah seems to be like neither one of them, as the Gemara explains. If it's going like Rav Nassan, well, our Mishnah says he could choose, he has the upper hand. But Bryce of Rav Nassan, like it doesn't say he if he wants to. It says that by default it's going to be a valid transaction. You just have to give him back the price difference. So that's not like our Mishnah. And even with our Nasi, Masnitin in our Mishnah, when it talks about where the wrong party, it says Ketani Lekeach, it says the buyer has the upper hand, like it says, Tenli Ma'isa, give me my money back. Obviously it's talking about the buyer. Yet the Braisa, Berbuda Nasi, Ketani Meicher, says that where the seller gets wrong, that's where he has the upper hand. But it sounds like if the buyer would get wrong, then you wouldn't have the same halacha. That's what it would sound like, even though seemingly you could say, as the Gemara will say, that no, it just picked an example, but the Gemara is assuming that no, it's specific. So the Gemara says Simon Zavrash, which the name is Amiram. Amr Rebbe Lazar, he says, Einah Zu, you're right, our Mishnah of Einah, any day Mishnah, I don't know who taught it. It's not like Rebuda, Hanasi, and it's not like Reb Nassan. Rabbi says, no, it's not true. La'olam Reb Nassan. You can say our Mishnah is like Reb Nassan. But Tananami B'Braisa, and you have to put into the Braisa of Reb Nassan also the words Ratza, and that it's not automatic, and he gets to choose, and that the Machlekes is by buying and selling that they disagree, that you get to choose which one. That's one pshat. Or Rav Amma says, no, you can even say Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. You can say the time of the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. And it's saying that in regards to Rav Nassan, we just said that this is what Rashi is saying, that the Machlekes in the Brisa is that Rav Nassan holds that only the buyer has the choice. Rav Nusa holds that only the seller has the choice. And Rava says, he says, he says, so he makes it very simple. He says, not true. Of course, it's actually exactly Yehuda Nasi. It's just picking a different example. One's talking about the Lekeh, one's talking about the Meicher. And then Ravashi says, take a nami, he says, a precise reading of our Mishnah also indicates that that he holds the same thing by the seller, and he's explaining the buyer, and he doesn't explain the seller, because what does it say? It says, Echad Lekech ve'echad HaMeicher. Our Mishnah said, the opening words of our Mishnah on this Amid said, whether the buyer, whether the seller, and then Mefarsh Lekech, it only explains the buyer, that what happens when he backs out. Shema Mina shiur she'er l'meicher. Obviously we left out the case of the seller. Shema Mina, that's what the Bryce adds on. The case that was missing out was the seller. But it's the same Yehuda Nasi who holds that he has the choice, he has the upper hand. So again, our Mishnah could be either one of them. Now, regarding this halacha of when we say that there is no halacha of Einah, like we said regarding the merchant, Sitmar, the Gemara has the following machlekes. If someone says to his friend, Amanas she'in loch alai oina. Look, I'm selling you this item, stipulating that the laws of oina should not apply to this transaction. So we have a machlekes Rab and Shmuel. Rab says yesh lo ilav oina. There will be halacha of oina. Shmuel says no, in lo ilav oina. Will not have the halacha of oina. Says the Gemara, Lema, let's say that this is machlekes Tanoim. Rav Damikre Meir, where he says that if you stipulate on what the Torah says, your stipulation is void, even if it's regarding monetary law. Or Shmuel Damikre Yehuda, who says it is valid. And then Shmuel says you won't have no, because you're stipulating. As the Gemara says, like learn the Brisa. If someone says to a woman, you're engaged to me, the Torah explicitly says that you have an obligation to your wife for clothing and for marital relations and for food. That's the guy says, on the condition that I can provide these things for you. So, she's engaged because he did a kedusha. Uchanoi bottle, the Rebbe says, all your conditions are null and void. The Torah says you have to. You're stipulating against the Torah. Your conditions are not valid. He differentiates. He says it depends. But regarding monetary law, for example, she'ering sus, which is food and clothing, which in contrast to marital relations, so Tanoi Kain, your condition is valid. It could be pardoned. It could be Michael, and she was Michael. Oina, which is Tzahar Gov, that's not given up to Mechila. So seemingly, when we talk about monetary law, which is Oina, could you be Michael or not, which is what the guy was stipulating, is a machlekes, remain Yehuda, which is a machlekes Rav and Shmuel. Rab would tell you no. Each one could tell you I could be like the other one. Rab would say that Anodamri Afillah Rabbi Yehuda. I could be even like Rabbi Yehuda. Because Ad can like Rabbi Yehuda, some they're saying that your Tanai is valid, which would sound like Shmuel. No, that's because Ela de Yada b'kamachla. That's because the stipulation, the fact because she's aware of it and accepting it, so she went into her rights to these obligations as a continue to the base. But over here, mi Yada. The stipulation is not effective, even according to Yehuda, because did he know? Did the buyer know that there's a no the machal to be Michael? He thought that that there was no no. That the buyer's not aware at the time of the sale was being overcharged. He said amanas, but he didn't waive his rights to the halachas of a no. So therefore, it's not the same case. And therefore, Rabbi Yehuda would agree that there would be Aina. You don't know definitively to be Michael. Or Shmuel Amar, that's the way Rav will answer. Shmuel will say, another Mefil Remeir. I could even be like Remeir. So it's not necessarily that they're totally in machlekes. Each one can say every time is like him. Ad can come Remeir Hasan. What do you find Remeir over there saying that the tonight is batal, which sounds not like Shmuel. And Shmuel says you could make it tonight and not. And Remeir says, no, your Tanai of Lava Shabbat against the Torah is batal. Oh, because that's Il Devade Ka'akar. That's because you're, at the time of the stipulation, you're definitely being uprooting the words of the Torah. The Torah says you have responsibility of Sheikh Suzvaina, and this guy's uprooting that obligation from himself. And even if he gives it at a later point in time, that's just a gift that he's given, but he's uprooting halacha from the Torah. Halacha over here, who said that he's uprooting anything? Maybe there's not going to be enough. And you're right, if there's not going to be, then he won't have to. But since you're not definitively uprooting, so therefore, since it's possible that the transaction will not contravene the laws of Anah, so therefore the stipulation actually would be effective. So therefore, each one of them says I could be like both Tanoim. Now, the Gemara explains, and he says, Lididi, to me, Mefarshali Menei Demar Shmuel is explained from the master Shmuel that it actually depends on the wording that you're using. Why? If someone says to his friend, on the condition that you don't have on me Oina, so that was the halacha of Shmuel that he said that because who said that he's uprooting? Maybe it's not going to be so you can make it tonight. That's not explicitly and definitively uprooting, even though technically it might. But if let's say your words were differently, let's say he said amnashe in boina, on the condition that there is no oina in it. If he says such a wording, so that's not a wording of being moichel oina. It's not a terminology of claiming oina. It's just saying on the condition that there is no oina. Now there is oina, so that's a mekach toyes. Sarei yesh baina. So there is going to be oina, but there is. You're saying on the condition it's not, but there is. And if he wants to back out, he would be able to back out, even according to Shmuel. Now, Mesa, the Gemara goes back to ask on what Rav had said that he could even be like Rabbi Yehuda, right? Rabbi Yehuda was the one who said that you could be masna amashikas b'Torah regarding monetary law, which sounded not like Rav, because Rav said you cannot say that there's no eidah. He said no, I could even be like Rabbi Yehuda, as he said that the difference is if the person knew to be meichel or didn't know to be meichel. However, the Gemara asks on that premise from the following brisa. The brisa says, "Hanoisi v'hanoisim ba'amana." If someone does business dealings with faithfulness, what does that mean? So it's actually like this: a certain contractual agreement. So if someone tells to his worker, he says, "Look, sell whatever you could, and give me the money at a certain time, and I'm relying on you." And he also, as the Gemara is going to say later on, he pays him for the effort. He's going to pay him for the hour, let's say, for the effort that he puts in. So that's one case. Or if someone says to his friend, and we're going to come back to this just to clarify once we brought in the brisa, but really the second case is really what we want. If someone says to his friend, on the condition that you don't have a mi'ayna, so these two cases, Allah would be in. So regarding the first case of amana, there's no ayna to say, wait a second, this is worth more. And if this guy sells it for a large amount of money, this guy can't say, well, I'm not going to give but just the value itself. No, there's no ayna over here regarding when you're selling ba'amana, or if the guy says that on condition that there's no ayna. So again, keep in mind the second case primarily. We'll get back to the first case. But l'Rav, the Amar, according to Rav, that he says, he said, I am even like Rabbi Yehuda, meaning that no one can stipulate Rav held that you can never circumvent ayna. Even according to Rabbi Yehuda, who we thought would be the one that would say like Shmuel, Rav said, no, he's even like me. So Hamani, who would the town of this brisa be? Someone is saying in this brisa, would make it that there's no ayna. So Mabai says, you're right, Machvarat, it's clear that Rav Makri Meir, we must say that Rav would say he's like Reb Meir, who said you cannot be Masna Mashaklas Batayra, and I know is one of them, even by Davish at the moment. Ushmul, Damakri Yehuda. And Rav would have to explain that this brisa is like Rabbi Yehuda, that even if the person doesn't know that they are Meichel, even in such a case, Rabbi Yehuda holds. That's one pshat. Rav Amai says, no, loy kasha, it's not a difficulty. Why not? I'll tell you why. It's a different case. Khan, Rav was talking about Bistan. When the guy says, unspecifically, he says that on the condition that you don't have amiyana, where the wrong party was unaware of the price difference at the time of the sale, so therefore he doesn't know to be Michael. So that's where Rav had said his halacha, and that Rabbi Yehuda agrees that there's not going to be any mechila, and therefore there's going to be halacha b'na. But Khan, the brisa is talking about b'mefarish, and this is what we had referenced on Laman Alf, where we said when you're explicit, he says, look, I know there's ayna, and I'm selling it to you on the condition that you don't have a mi'ayna. Oh, that's where Rabbi Yehuda says that you could stipulate and your condition is going to be valid, because that's similar to sharing sus, which you know explicitly from the Torah, and you know that you're circumventing, but still, if you know, and the person is being Michael, then it's going to be effective. Therefore, that's where even Rav would agree to. The time like Linda Brisa. But when we say that there's one person on another person, that's the stop. By regular sale. Of Mefarish is what you were mentioning before. But if a guy was explicit, for example, he says, the seller says to the buyer, this object I'm selling to you for 200. I know it's only worth 100, but I'm on the condition that you're not going to have me. Of course, if that's what they knew and that's what they're agreeing to, he's not going to have Allah. And the same thing works the other way too. If the buyer says to the seller, this object I'm buying for 100, I know it's really worth 200. But I'm on the condition that there's no on me. There's not going to be enough. So again, there's two approaches how to explain the brisa. Either you're right that this brisa must be like Rabbi Yehuda, not like Rav, or no, you could even say it's like Rav, but there's a difference between Stam and Mefarish, and the brisa is talking about by Mefarish. Now, related to what we mentioned in the brisa, the Gemara goes back to explain that case, which we said that if you do business ba'amana, there's not going to be ayna. So turn about in the brisa, explain you that case. Hanoisi v'hanoisin ba'amana. If someone wheels and deals with amana, as we explained, that what that is that you ask someone to sell an item that you have, and then he'll give you the monies of what he sold at a later date, and he relies on him, whatever the money he's going to get for it, and he pays him for the effort that he puts in for selling. Now, it's an interesting brisa. The brisa is like this, and it'll get more when we speak about in the next paragraph about the halachas of ribbis. So the brisa is like this: Hariza lo yichashav hasara ba'amana. Don't calculate the bad with amana, and we'll translate in a second with Rashi what this means. This hayafa b'shava, and the good for its value. So Rashi says like this, that you can't make that the weighting of the good money should be the payment for the work that he's doing. What does this mean? So Rashi explains like this. Let's say a guy had 2 wines, 2 barrels. One was good quality, high quality, which people are jumping to buy right away. You put on your status in 1 second, and I want, it's gone in a second. Then you have the other barrel, which is not good wine, and you could only sell it in the stores, and it takes a long time till it's bought. Okay, so what's this? That's yafa, and that's ra. Okay, so what about this? The seller, I mean the owner of the item, cannot tell this bacher that's working for him, look, this good wine, I'm giving this to you b'shava, meaning for what its value is, and you're going to gain now that you're going to be able to keep, because you're only paying him, let's say, shiur's time, you'll give me, because it takes a long time to sell the other one in the store, then you'll pay me, you'll give me the money then. But that means to say, he was able to have this money over Pesach and whatever, because he was able to sell that in a second. The good wine, he was able to sell in a second. Now that wine, that money that he got from the wine, is his to play with. And that has value. He cannot say here, look, here's the good wine in its value, on the condition that you sell me the bad wine in the store as much as you could, and when it's sold, then you'll pay me the money of both of them. So what the owner is trying to gain, he's trying to get himself off the hook, that by me waiting for the money of the good wine, instead of me paying you for the effort you're putting in to sell the bad wine, that value is what is my payment to you. So the problem is that's like ribbis, because that's essentially what ribbis is. Ribbis is that you're going to pay me for the money for the loan that I gave you. So his payment over here of the effort that he's doing is really for the delay of the time of the waiting for the money to come back. Ribbis is when you say, look, you could hold on to this money for 10 weeks, but you got to pay me something for that. This guy, his tircha that he's doing to sell the bad wine is payment to the balabuz for the money that he gets to hold on to the whole ben azmanim that he was able to sell the wine right away. So the Bryce is saying, you can't, now let's read the words of the Bryce again, you'll see it now, it's just hard to see it without just seeing Rashi first. The guy is giving him, he gives him a product and he trusts him to try to sell it. So we say, don't count the bad for amana, which means say, I trust you, whatever it is that you can sell, you'll sell. But the good one for its value, because that, whatever it's worth, he's getting that money right away. Don't do that, because essentially you're paying him for the tirch he's putting in to sell the bad wine, standing on the street corner over there on Madison to try to sell that bad wine as payment for the good wine that he got the money right away. No. Either both of them should be bamana. Meaning, like Rashi explained, you give him the way people usually do with amana that you set a certain price for him, as Gemara is going to explain later on, like 4 for 100, whatever it is, the guy puts in the effort, whatever you could sell, you sell, but both will be the same. Or, to the contrary, both will be the equal amount, meaning the profit will be from the recipient, and whatever it is that he gets, but don't do one biyafa and one amana, because then you run into the problem about it being like ribbis. And now, so the Gemara says that if he did give it in b'amana, which is here, you try to sell as much as you can, when they come to calculate, he should deduct from him v'noisen le'schar katav. He also has to give to the worker, this bacher, the payment for the porters who have to transport it from his house to the store. And if he needed camels, you have to give him schar gamal, the wages for the camel, and schar pundik, and he has to stay overnight in a hotel on his way to Orlando. You give him the wages for the hotel. But schar atzma in a neto. But he won't take his own wages, because he already gave him his full wages. Says the Gemara, what does that mean? Where do you give it to him? So my puppy says it's bitzadruye. We're talking about those who sell this hemp garments where there's a set price. The over arbalameya, that whoever puts an effort to try to sell it, for every 100 he gets 4. That's this payment of amana that is generally a set price. So everything else is deductions. Is okay. Take off this. That I don't have to give you back. From whatever the profits were, but amana payment, at least for this product, was 4 for every 100. And all we said in the brisa, and we only brought in the brisa because we mentioned it, that there's no oina on amana, like we said, that it's not a sale, and that's what Taz even discusses, the way Rashi is saying what is the lashon of oina over here at all, but be that as it may, so once we mention that case, we just explained that you could have a potential ribbis situation if you're selling with amana. So that's what the right is saying. Be careful. Don't say, here, look, the good one, I'll let you take the money right away, and then the amana you'll give me a few months later, and then you'll pay me all of it then, because then that might appear like ribbis. Rather get either both amana or both the yafa. Thank you to any time.